This year being the 75th birthday of Wonder Woman, what better time than now to let Johnnie Torch take you for a look back at the monumental, if oft-overlooked series starring Lynda Carter, in her satin tights, fighting for our rights, and the old red, white, and blue. Johnnie Torch reviews Wonder Woman, the series. To start, we'd have to go back to 1974, where the first attempt was made for a Wonder Woman pilot starring Kathy Lee Crosby, who neither looked like Wonder Woman nor had an accurate costume. The great Ricardo Montalban played the villain. I caught it on cable in the wee small hours one night years ago, and it was entirely forgettable, so if you haven't seen it, no worries. You're not missing anything. And we can move on now. That's it. Well, that attempt came to nothing, but fortunately the powers that be took another stab at it. In 1975, lovely Lynda Carter got the role as Wonder Woman for a new series that hewed closer to the original comic incarnation. Lynda was the perfect choice. She both resembled Wonder Woman perfectly, but also brought a lot of humanity to the character. Much like Christopher Reeve as Superman, Lynda became the gold standard for a perfect casting in the superhero genre. As Major Steve Trevor, Wonder Woman's sometime love interest, Lyle Wagner was cast. Lyle was in the Carol Burnett Show and lost out to Adam West several years earlier for the role of Batman in the 60s Batman TV series. He got another shot at a DC icon here, and he's much better suited here, bringing his all-American look and authoritative voice to Steve Trevor, a character that's more or less a thankless role, but more on that later. The pilot is fairly accurate to the origin story. During World War II, Trevor crash lands on Paradise Island. A contest is held to choose an Amazon to take the injured Trevor back to America. Diana's mom, who just happens to be Queen, forbids Diana from taking part in the contest. So Diana enters the contest in disguise. She wins after passing the most difficult challenge, bullets and bracelets. After discovering the truth, her mother allows her to go, but not before bestowing upon her the golden lasso of truth, the belt of power, secret of her strength, her bulletproof bracelets, a tiara that doubles both as a boomerang and as a communication device, and her new costume inspired by the American flag, a symbol of her new ambassadorial status in man's world. Wonder Woman even has the famous invisible plane in the show. In subsequent episodes, it's funny to see how low-tech the distance shots are, where it looks like a toy with a Wonder Woman action figure inside. Wonder Woman's famous transformation by twirling was an invention of Lynda Carter. In the comics, she'd toss the lasso over her head, and for whatever reason, her clothing would transform into her costume. Not being able to do that on a 70s TV budget, Carter suggested spinning. In the early episodes, this was done in slow motion, but it was quickly replaced by a lightning flash that better served the urgency of her quick change. There are some slow spots where the Nazi villains are concerned, but overall it's a fun and fitting tribute to Wonder Woman's first big adventure. Red Buttons plays a shifty talent agent, and there's some amusing fish-out-of-water antics as Diana tries to become acclimated into this new world. This marks the only time Wendy bounces off the bullets of a machine gun, wielded by a little old lady, with her bracelets. Since this was the pilot, they spared no expense on the effects. In the end, Diana takes on the role of Steve's secretary, a role that seems to amuse her more than anything else, and wears a dowdy uniform and glasses to conceal her true identity from the world. Another character from Wonder Woman's comics was introduced in the first season, Etta Candy, played by Beatrice Colin. They even went so far as to emulate the comic's little yellow narration boxes to transition scenes. The earliest episodes of the first season play a little too strongly into the girl power mode. Thankfully, they don't overplay that hand for too long. Wonder Woman's little sis Drusilla makes an impressive appearance in the first season, played by Deborah Winger. She does a good job as the cute, wide-eyed kid wanting to enjoy the conveniences of the then-modern world. Upon spinning herself, she learns that she too can transform into Wonder Girl. It's a pity Winger doesn't show up in the future seasons, as she's very fun to watch. These days they'd have spun her off into her own show, but those days you were lucky to have at least one comic show on at any given time. At this point, Carolyn Jones replaced Cloris Leachman as Queen Hippolyta, and she was my favorite of the three actresses that took the role. Leachman was a bit too neurotic for my taste, and Beatrice Straight was alright but fairly generic. Jones of course played Morticia in The Addams Family, and had played the DC villainess Marcia Queen of Diamonds in the Batman series. The highlight of the short first season was the two-parter The Feminine Mystique, where Hippolyta sends Drusilla to bring Diana back home and give up her role as Wonder Woman. Diana isn't too successful in convincing her mother of the threat of the Nazis until they attempt to take over Paradise Island, and Diana's family must band together to overthrow their occupation. ABC ended up canceling the show after the first season, but CBS was willing to pick it up, albeit with a few changes. They set the show in then present day, which I think was a wise choice. Wendy may have gotten her start in World War II, but she's more well known for her adventures in modern times. There was also only so much you could do with Nazi agents as the villains week after week. It was a refreshing change. The iconic theme song was retained, but the lyrics referring to the Axis were changed in favor of the new time period. The transition was easy enough to explain. After helping the US win World War II, Wendy returned to Paradise Island to take her place as the princess. When Colonel Steve Trevor Jr., still played by Lyle Wagner, lands on Paradise Island with others as victims of a terrorist attack, Diana is pressed back into service as Wonder Woman, in a clever recreation of the origin tale, only set in the 1970s. Trevor is later surprised to learn that Wendy is the same woman his dad told him stories about as a child, and how she helped win World War II, all without aging a day. Wendy's costume was retooled as well to being somewhat skimpier, reflecting the changing times, I guess. I didn't mind the changes, except they cut about half the stars from the lower part of her costume for no apparent reason. Did we lose some states from the Union since the 40s or something? Her bracelets went from silver to gold. They also gave her an underwater diving suit that she got during her double transformation. The suit was also used whenever she rode a motorcycle, which was more often than you'd think. Gee, the Captain America parallels are just too big to ignore. Both fought in World War II. Both beat the aging process to return in present day. Both wear the American flag prominently in their costumes. Both take up with a relative of the person they were an item with back in the day. And they both rode motorcycles. Once in a while. Where was I? Anyway, Diana now worked with Steve as an agent of IDAC. The agency had a supercomputer named Ira that more or less looked like the light bright I had as a kid. You know, the thing with the black paper and you stuck the colored pegs in and they'd light up in a pattern. Ira knew she was Wonder Woman but wouldn't say anything. It had a little sidekick named Rover that drove around going meep meep like the Roadrunner. It seemed like something out of the Buck Rogers show that was also on around that time. Their boss was originally a guy named Joe Atkinson, played by Norman Burton, and he'd talk to the president or whatever and give Diana and Steve their mission. About halfway through this season, Joe dropped out, and Steve was bumped up to his executive position. The theme was altered again at this point, dropping all the lyrics save the female chorus repeating Wonder Woman. One of the problems with the season at this point was they conveniently started dropping Diana wearing the glasses. Much like Clark Kent, that's 90% of her secret identity, so it made little sense. Granted, Wonder Woman only accounted for about 30% of the episode, and I suppose it was a lot to ask of guys to put up with Lynda hiding behind oversized glasses and frumpy clothing for too long. This season boasts several really cool episodes with some entertaining villains. My top 5 would be... Number 5, Knockout. A former cop and friend of Steve's, played by Jane Kennedy, leads a terrorist organization and kidnaps Steve. Diana gets some help from a former Vietnam vet and cabbie played by Ted Shackelford. Ted would return in the 3rd season as a new character, an alien, ironically partnered with his Knots Landing co-star Joan Van Ark. Perhaps I like it since this is one of the last times Trevor is out in the field. But it's an interesting story, and I enjoy Ted's role as the single dad of a mute son. Keep your eyes open for a Honeymooners perennial recurring actor Frank Marth as a baddie. Number 4, the Pied Piper. Not a version to be confused with the original DC Flash villain. In this case, Martin Mull plays Hamilton Rule, a spoiled rock star. He gets Atkinson's daughter, played by Jan Brady herself, Eve Plum, under his spell along with other girls to steal for him. The real highlight is probably tough guy actor Denny Miller, who dresses like a genie for much of the episode, taking on Wonder Woman in a pretty decent fight scene. Diana also transforms by spinning while tied to a chair. I really like Mull, but it's downright hilarious seeing him allegedly singing his songs as a rock star. Number 3, I Do, I Do. This one starts with a fun twist opening of Diana getting married to some guy we've never seen before. Obviously, it's some kind of ruse for the undercover mission she's on. The villain is Henry Darrow in his second Wonder Woman appearance. He also played a villain in the Incredible Hulk's 5th season episode Sanctuary, before finally playing a good guy as Don Alejandro de la Vega, the father of Zorro in the New World series. I guess truth be told, the villain plot isn't among the best. He's sort of a hypno-masseur. Nice work if you can get it. This is where they sort of threw all pretense of trying to conceal her identity as much as possible out the window. I mean, if Clark Kent took off his glasses and walked around in a swimsuit, chances are most people would recognize him as his alter ego. Not so for Diana, I guess. Number 2, the two-parter Mind Stealers from Outer Space. Unlike the live-action Marvel shows of the day where the villains tended to be child abusers and coin collection thieves, Wonder Woman's show firmly had its feet planted in the world of the fantastic. She faced androids and aliens on more than one occasion. In this case, the main alien baddie is an obvious appeal to the newly popular Darth Vader from Star Wars. It's fun to see Wonder Woman go up against a villain of equal strength. Alas, the other villains are not quite as convincing, but the lead alien takes over the body of Dick Van Patten's son Vincent for most of the story. Dak Rambo shows up as Andros, a benevolent alien out to help save our world. There's a hint of a possible romance between the two. Well, more than there was with Steve, anyway. He's supposed to be the son of the Andros that appeared in the first season, played by the much older Tim O'Connor, best remembered as Dr. Hewer in the Buck Rogers series, whom Diana also seemed to be a bit smitten with. In the end, it seems as if both he and the previous older Andros are one and the same, making for a confusing backstory. Number 1, the Deadly Toys. While the show didn't rely on an abundance of DC villains, they did a pretty good job in casting former Riddler, the enormously talented Frank Gorshin, as a semi-recognizable Silver Age version of Superman's foe, the Toy Man. It's great seeing Gorshin get the nod in another comic book series. It's a Christmas-themed episode where Toy Man builds an android Wonder Woman to defeat the original and take her place. Naturally, Lynda plays both parts during the fun confrontation between Wonder Women. For the third season, the series continued to be very strongly written, but some oddities began creeping in. For example, the famous transformation scenes began being cut. Oftentimes Wonder Woman would just appear without us seeing the transformation. Other times a stunt double would be used in the distance, or a stock scene from previous episodes would be quickly cut in. This was pretty disappointing. Part of the charm of the genre is the superhero transformation. Think of Chris Reeves ripping open his shirt to expose the iconic S symbol, or Bill Bixby's white eyes signaling an imminent Hulk out. Wonder Woman's spinning was just as iconic, but for reasons unknown, started being cut. Maybe it was for time. Maybe Lynda just had enough of spinning twice an episode, and begged off doing it in the third season as often as possible since the show was already well established. I don't know. The theme song was updated once again, with the male chorus replacing the female chorus. By now, the series felt much more a product of the 70s. Diana seemed more a part of the times than ever before. She seemed less visitor to the outside world, and more like someone born and raised in the US. Well, I suppose she'd been here for several years at this point. They continued to up the action in the fight scenes. In earlier episodes, 1D tended to throw thugs around with relative ease. By now in the series, she'd break a little sweat by throwing a few punches and kicks during an altercation. As I mentioned earlier, Lyle Wagner's role really started getting thankless at this point, and I mean to ridiculous levels. The guy rarely left his office by now. He was constantly stuck behind his desk with a photo of himself, his dad, behind him. That was admittedly a nice touch. And his hair was let gray, making him appear more like Wendy's uncle than love interest. I'm not quite sure the reason for this. Steve never really got a fair shake as a love interest. Originally, he pretty much just served as a male damsel in distress. He'd get in some kind of mess, punch a few guys in the face, then get taken captive until Wonder Woman came to the rescue. He'd be over the moon just seeing her for a few minutes, but he never kissed Wendy, and they never seemed anything more than friends. Maybe the powers that be just didn't like the concept of Wendy having both a father and his identical son as potential love interests that caused things to not pan out for them romantically. It's all just speculation. I mean, nobody's watching the show for Steve Trevor, so In a sense, he'd just be taking screen time away from Wonder Woman, but it is kinda sad that he became relegated to afterthought status. In the hero love interest pantheon, Steve is less a Lois Lane or a Mary Jane, and more a Vicky Vale, I guess. The season ended with a fairly mediocre Phantom of the Roller Coaster two-parter. Ike Eisenman, perhaps best remembered as Scotty's ill-fated nephew in Wrath of Khan, as a roller coaster enthusiast, who gets abducted by the amusement park owner's deformed but benevolent twin brother. Presumably, it was setting up big changes in the potential fourth season by having Diana move to LA, ostensibly writing Steve Trevor out entirely, but the show ended up being cancelled. The top 5 best episodes of this season were... Number 5, the two-parter, The Boy Who Knew Her Secret. This episode is another take on the popular Invasion of the Body Snatchers kick of the time. It has an interesting premise that gets more or less squandered by the overly padded first part. Skip, played by Clark Brandon, is a likable kid that seems like the only one in town not affected by the alien takeover plot. Eventually, he sees Diana's transformation and discovers her secret. Later, Diana's memories of her secret ID are erased by one of the aliens. There's no real connection made between Wendy and Skip. He doesn't really figure into her regaining her memory, but in a superficial way. It seems like an interesting concept that this least likely of kids would be the one to actually save Wonder Woman by helping restore her memory. Since Wendy has no other confidant, at least in the US, that actually knows her double identity, it would be quite the problem if she were to lose her memory in that way. In the end, Skip is made to forget via the golden lasso, but rediscovers the secret via his audio diary. As I said, it's an interesting concept that really doesn't get used to its full potential. Number 4, The Fine Art of Crime. The legendary Roddy McDowall makes his second appearance in the show, only the second actor to play a villain in this show as well as the Batman series, the Bookworm, and later the voice of the Mad Hatter in Batman the Animated Series. Along with Ed Begley Jr., who also has his own Batman connection, he was Riddler's boss in Batman Forever, Roddy plays an art thief that uses his method of turning his lifelike statues, which are actually people under his control, into the instruments of his robberies. Will Wonder Woman become his next prized work of art? Number 3, Formicida. While the show didn't have Wonder Woman's arch-villainess, the Cheetah, they did give her an ant-inspired villainess named Formicida, given the power to control ants. This episode certainly isn't recommended to anyone with an ant phobia, but it is fun to see Wendy do battle with another female costumed character. Number 2, Spaced Out. This was a fun look at geek culture back when sci-fi conventions were still in their infancy. The bulk of the episode is set at a sci-fi convention where a guest star, the great Rene Auberjonois, best known for his sci-fi stint as Odo in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, plays a pro-jewel thief who fails to deliver the goods to his employer, the great Paul L. Smith, best known as Bluto in the classic Popeye movie, who gives a Sidney Greenstreet-esque performance. Rene spends a good deal of time in costume as the Masked Avenger. There are also some cool nods to Star Wars, Logan's Run, and Forbidden Planet. Number 1, Amazon Hot Wax. Diana goes undercover as a singer, which is pretty much an excuse to give Lynda a chance to sing a couple of songs, which she does very well. Is there nothing Wonder Woman can't do, you ask? The answer is a resounding no. The plot is fairly amusing as Rick Springfield, is there a 70s show he didn't appear in, you ask? The answer is a resounding no. Leads a rock band that seems like a cross between Kiss and the Monkees. They aid Wendy in finding a missing singer who is presumed dead. The bad guys turn out to be a singing brother and sister duo, an obvious and hilarious take on Karen and Richard Carpenter, the male half being played by Judge Reinhold. Well, there you have it. The show was cancelled thereafter the third season. Ironically, Lynda maintains that she gets paid no residuals from the series, as by the terms of her contract, in 40 years, the show is yet to return a sufficient profit. Unfortunately, there were no reunion movies on the horizon for Carter and company, and she never returned to provide the voice of Wonder Woman in any animated project. A new comic book based on the series has come out. But regardless of not appearing in any additional media, Lynda Carter left an indelible mark as the Amazonian princess. Gal Gadot is set to take Wonder Woman to the big screen for the first time in next year's Wonder Woman movie. But for me, there's nothing like the classic performance of Lynda Carter, played back when DC characters were allowed to smile. Wonder Woman carried a lasso instead of murder weapons like swords and spears, and she exuded a confidence that, whatever the trouble, not to worry. We have Wonder Woman on our side. Given the impact of her portrayal on the character, as well as the overall faithfulness to the traditional origin and characters, I can't give Wonder Woman the series any less than 5 stars out of 5. Until next time, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you soon.